Kim McDonnell, welcome.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for having me this afternoon.
My pleasure. A little bit of a different podcast for Meet. I want to start with you. Who is Kim McDonnell?
Gosh, that's such a complicated question.
You can go back as far as you want just to give us context, because this is a really interesting episode.
Fantastic. So I started my career in the advertising and marketing industry here in Australia, working for both independent agencies as well as some of the large multinational agencies. But prior to that, I'm a country girl at heart, born in northwest Queensland and grew up in Mount Isa.
Yeah, wow.
And then left when I was 17 to go down to Victoria to go to uni down there.
To get a proper education.
I don't know. It was a pretty good education up there in Mount Isa.
Yeah, real life education.
Exactly.
How'd you get into advertising? Because Mount Isa, private school, I'm assuming, in Victoria, into advertising. They seem like three big pillars that no doubt had a lot of colour in between.
Absolutely. So I left Mount Isa when I was 17 after I finished my high school, and I attended Monash university. On my first day at university, I saw more people at once than I'd seen in my entire life. So it was a huge cultural shock.
Wow.
And I just fell into advertising after uni. I wasn't sure what path or direction life was going to take, and as with a lot of journeys in life, you tend to follow the path that's meant for you in the end, and things always happen for a reason, and fell into advertising and progressed my career from there.
And a wild industry too, I dare say.
Crazy wild industry, and in the 90s and early 2000s, it was a very different industry to what it was now. And, you know, it's a industry that is unbelievably exciting with the creativity and the amazing people that you meet along the journey with that. But I loved it. I love my life in advertising. Was
there elements of Mad Men during your career in advertising?
You know, there definitely were elements of that, and there were definitely elements of gender inequalities. And as a mum of 5 kids now, but three at the time, it was really challenging trying to juggle my career and my family and being a mum. And I worked until the day each of my kids were born, and went back to work on my way home from the hospital just in fear of losing my job. So it's a different world now, though, thankfully.
That's incredible. Yeah, no doubt. I remember there was that, I won't say amazing movie, but it was insightful movie called Reuben Guthrie, which was about alcohol abuse and drug abuse, and all centered around the quintessential advertising executive. And forget gender inequality, the inequality between someone that wants to just be a normal, healthy human being and what the industry during the 90s and the zeros wanted. You know, it was super eye-opening. Thankyou.org. Thankful.org.
Yes.
Thank you. Thankful.
Yeah.
Thankful.org. Where did the idea come from? What is it all about? What's the mission? Like it almost seems like it just should be something that's warm and fuzzy, but when you scratch below the surface, you're doing incredible things with some of the most powerful organizations in the world already. Where did the idea come from?
You know, I think the idea came from my inspiration was my kids. And as a mum of 5 children and being a natural perfectionist, when 2 of my kids were diagnosed with learning disabilities, it was a challenge for me to be able to accept that and to cope with that. And going to parent-teacher interviews, I would feel physically ill and sick a week before those parent-teacher interviews because I knew they'd be telling me everything my kids couldn't do. And it got to a point in one parent-teacher interview, I said to the teachers, stop telling me what my child can't do. Stop telling me where my child is compared to every other kid in the class. Tell me how much she's progressed in the last 6 months and how much she has improved. And tell me what she can do and what she's doing great. Because they're the things we need to focus on, because I never want my children to grow up to feel anything less than worthy and successful and capable of leading unbelievable lives. Even if they're not straight A students, they don't need to be. So I guess unconsciously, I was always thinking about this notion of celebrating who we are rather than focusing on what we're not, and celebrating our strengths rather than our weaknesses, and being thankful for those things. And teaching my 5 kids when they look in that mirror to recognize that they are not perfect, and that's okay, because none of us are, and none of us need to be to lead happy, successful and fulfilling lives. And then throughout my advertising career, and for the last 10 years of my career, we had our own agency. And I guess this notion of thankfulness and being thankful just became more and more prominent. And it was an idea that wouldn't go away and kept re-emerging, to the point where my husband said, stop, you need to do something about this, because this is more than just an idea. It has the power to change lives globally. And at that point, we did travel around the world, and we spoke to psychologists and thought leaders who joined us in the enthusiasm of wanting to make the world a more thankful place for a lot of reasons. There's more than 20 years of scientific research behind gratitude and thankfulness. And I could talk to you all day about some of that research, but the 2 big takeaways from that research is, 1, if we do remember to hit the pause button and celebrate all that we have and all that we have achieved, rather than the constant focus on what we don't have and what we're yet to achieve, to lead happy and successful and fulfilling lives, it will lead to greater individual happiness. But the second point that is even more impactful, and it's part of the research, is the act of being thankful has been proven to be the single most powerful tool we can all implement in our lives on a daily basis to improve mental health and wellness. And we know that the World Health Organization has declared mental health and wellness a global epidemic. It doesn't discriminate, and it will impact at least 1 in 4 people. The reality is it's more likely to be 100% of people at some point in their lives. So this notion of wanting to make the world a more thankful place has the ability to impact millions of people's lives from a mental health and wellness perspective across the globe.
Talk a little bit more about thankful, because it all sounds amazing, but it also sounds almost too good to be true. Warm and fuzzy rainbows and butterflies and those kinds of things. The science, I'm super interested in just a little bit more around that.
Around the science, sure. Yeah. So when I remember to recognize and be thankful for those small things in my life, it has a physical chemical reaction in the front of my brain. And if I practice it, it's been proven with that bank of research, if I remember and practice being thankful and expressing gratitude on a daily basis, I can actually rewire my brain to think differently and to have a different perspective on the world. But what is so exciting is that it's contagious. And I'm having a chemical reaction at the front of my brain when I remember to be thankful. But when I tell you, Paul, that I'm thankful for you, you immediately have a chemical reaction at the back of your brain. So it is contagious. And there's also the physical benefits of thankful that have been proven. You have better immune systems with white blood cell counts. It's better for your cardiovascular health. It's been proven to improve relationships when we acknowledge all that we love about our partners rather than focusing on all of the things that drive us crazy.
There's a blinding flash of the obvious, people.
Exactly. So there's research continues. You know, there's been research into the power of teaching our children this notion of thankfulness at a young enough age, because the pro-social benefits when we remember to be thankful are greater compassion, kindness, and empathy. Yeah. And amongst that research with children, it's been proven that these kids, if they've been taught the notion of thankfulness and gratitude, grow up to be more successful adults. Not because they get better academic grades or because of their socioeconomic situation, but because of those pro-social benefits. And they are more compassionate, they're kinder, they're more empathetic, which makes them better human beings, better leaders, and better people that other people want to be around. Yeah. So it's endless and it's amazing.
And is it some of the big institutions that are actually doing the study, like people like the World Health Organization and some of the leading universities?
Universities across the globe absolutely are doing this research. And Martin Seligman is the grandfather of positive psychology and all of the research and leading the way. And you've got schools like Geelong Grammar now down in Melbourne who have a whole positive psychology curriculum as part of their education because they've recognised the proven benefits of it. Schools across the globe are starting to implement this on a regular basis within curriculum and positive-based learning. But universities, the Greater Good Science Centre out of Berkeley in California do a lot of work around this as well. Robert Emmons has done a lot of research. So it is something that's happening globally. And the other great thing about thankfulness is that you can't be thankful and you can't express thankfulness unless you're also practicing mindfulness and gratitude. So, mindfulness has been a buzzword in the world for a very long time now, and we all know we should be mindful, but how do you do it and how do you practice it and integrate it into our daily lives? And if we were to ask 10 people what it means to be mindful and how they practice mindfulness, we're likely to get 10 very different answers and some blank expressions. But if we ask a 6-year-old kid or an 86-year-old person what they're thankful for, they can answer the question. So the simplicity of the idea is what makes it so powerful, and it's relevant to every single audience and every single demographic.
Yeah, I get that. And the mindfulness piece is the most obvious technique for having mindfulness meditation?
No, there's so many ways for mindfulness. It could be as simple as putting some music on and listening to the words of your music, and that's the way you're being mindful and escaping and being in that moment. It could be going for a walk in the park and putting down that having a bit of a digital detox, putting the phone away and just being there at the time. Go for a walk in the park and see 3 things that in the park that you're thankful for.
Without your phone.
Without your phone. Listen to the birds, hear the sounds of kids laughing, feel the grass beneath your feet, or just look up and see the colour of a sky on a winter's day.
But this is the biggest challenge, isn't it? That the statistic is that 84, the number I heard, 84% of people in Western countries have their phone beside them within arm's reach 24 hours a day.
Do you know, I think the more connected we are digitally, then the less connected we are to our community. And that, again, has been another proven benefit of being thankful. It gives us a greater sense of connectivity and a greater sense of community as well. So you're right. And it's tough to put the phone aside for a few minutes and to digitally detox, but the benefits.
Because it's such a fascinating world we live where we literally have people that crave followers, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of followers, and yet they don't seem to crave true friends, those 3, 4, 5 true friends in their life anymore. And I'm just wondering whether the science around the benefits of mindfulness and gratitude are also highlighting the destructiveness, and perhaps that's too strong a word, but the destructiveness of this vast community that we have, that there is no true connection outside of, the best of us, the best photos, the best quotes, the best thoughts, none of the realness.
Yeah, and absolutely. There's, I think that whole quest for perfection, and, social media perpetuates that quest for perfection because we only put up our very best photos on social media or when we're having the very best time and we've been able to curate what message and what image we want the world to see. So there's been a piece of research from Bath University that said that the younger demographic, the Gen Zs and the millennials, are the generation who are most likely to suffer from mental health and wellness, more so than any other generation, largely due to the influence of social media and the quest for perfection and wanting to have that perfect life and expecting everything in their life to be perfect. And we all know that we're never going to achieve perfection.
Fast
it doesn't exist.
And perfect.
Yes. So absolutely, there's a lot of correlation between social media and digitally being connected to being disconnected with communities.
It's interesting, this trial that Instagram have started here in Australia last week around, and I don't quite exactly know what they're trying to do, what they've actually done, because you still seem to be able to see likes, but they're proposing that other people can't see how many times your image has been liked, but you can still see how many times it's liked. Because this is what I understand the challenge is, that kids are putting things up. Well, let's not say kids. People are putting photos and ideas up, and if they're not liked enough times to their satisfaction, then they're taking it down out of a sign of rejection or disappointment. And that seems incredibly sad that they're getting feedback 24 hours a day that they're not quite cutting it.
And that, I think, is the challenge. There's no escaping it. It is 24 hours. And in generations previously, it wasn't as intense. It wasn't constant. We
home to mum and dad and be protected.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas now there's no escaping it. And as parents, as much as we want to protect our children and control what media they consume, we can't, because we're not with them 24 hours a day and we don't know what media they're always consuming. So it's a tough challenge.
Yeah. What's the mission?
So after speaking with thought leaders across the globe and them all getting excited about this crazy notion of wanting to make the world a more thankful place, we said, okay, how can we do this in a way that is socially responsible, that has social impact, and how can we have the biggest impact in the world?
How could it be socially irresponsible to do something like this?
I guess it could be socially irresponsible if we don't do it in a way that is thoughtful and very conscious about it. And we wanted to make sure that we are conscious and we're protecting the integrity of what Thankful is all about. And what we did was created a business model because we recognised the only way we could have genuine social impact at scale and globally scalable as well is if we turned this into a robust and rigorous business model. So putting a business associated with Thankful is where it could go terribly wrong if we weren't very conscious and protective of the integrity of being thankful, because it is it's precious. So we built a business model to demonstrate that doing good is good for business.
Yeah.
And at the heart of that business model is a innovative IP strategy where we have globally trademarked the word thankful across more than 23 different categories. So everything from online digital publishing and blogging to homewares, giftware, fashion, non-alcoholic drinks, baby products, pet care products, perfume and cosmetics, flowers, loyalty programs, etc. Which means that we are now able to partner with global brands to have thankful products so that every single time a consumer purchases a Thankful co-branded product, through the branding and packaging and just the word itself, it's enough to remind them to stop and pause and celebrate all that is good in life, which quite frankly in the world right now, we all need reminding. But as a consequence of their purchase, they have also just helped to create a thankful moment for somebody somewhere in the world. And what we're doing is creating the world's first global lifestyle brand that is supported by more than 20 years of scientific research, that's scientifically proven to make you feel good every single time you engage with it. But we are also creating a multi-product, multi-cause social enterprise organisation, which means our social impact has the potential to be huge. So as an example, if a consumer were to purchase a Thankful perfume and cosmetic, they're helping to create thankful moments for women and girls across the globe. If they purchase a Thankful homewares product, they're helping one of the 70 plus million people who are displaced in the world right now, who are refugees and homeless.
Through financial aid and events and support.
And by purchasing the product, which provides ongoing sustainable revenue and a revenue stream to fund the social impact side of the Thankful organisation and through our foundation. So it's reimagining traditional philanthropic models, and it genuinely is social enterprise to demonstrate that a commercial entity, so doing good, is genuinely good for business, both commercially as well as social impact. And it's the triple bottom line.
And the governance piece around that. So you partner with, and I was looking at the website, is it Kimasabi? Who are the outwear?
Digital agency. Yeah, they're an agency.
They're an agency. Yep. So you partner with a Kimasabi. They pay a percentage to you for having this co-branding on their website or their products. That money then gets used for programs. So that money then goes into our commercial entity, of which we channel a percentage of our revenue, not our profit, but our revenue directly into our foundation. Okay. And that is a
depending upon each of the campaigns. And then what money stays inside the commercial entity is used to create global amplification campaigns and marketing campaigns around the big issues. So as an example, we've launched in the US, Thankful for Women, a global campaign to promote gender equality and eliminate violence against women. We have a multiple range of not-for-profit partners who are partnering with us to amplify that and put marketing dollars behind it. And then the other portion goes directly to fund programs through our not-for-profit partners. And everything in our foundation, as close to 100% in the dollar, goes directly to those not-for-profit organisations to have measurable impact and to create thankful moments for those in need.
And the team, the thankful team, how do you reward yourself enough without it being unpalatable for supporters? Because it's an interesting one, I find, with professional people that go and do these amazing things, that balancing act between being a capitalist and being a philanthropist?
It's a great question, and I think that's where social enterprise is really quite exciting and unique. And we say our number one goal is to create and have as big a social impact as we possibly can. I still have a family I need to feed and bills and bills to pay as well. So I earn a salary. Yeah. It's not by any means millions and millions of dollars. It's a standard market rate salary for somebody in my role, and being entrepreneurial and being in startup stage for the last 2.5 years. It's not a very big salary, and sometimes it's no salary. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is your husband involved also? Or he's off balancing the risk ledger?
He was involved because we've moved to New York and we're permanently based in New York now. So for the first 2 years we were doing this together, and we sold everything we have here in Australia. We sold the family home, packed up teenage kids, took them out of very nice private schools here in Melbourne, and they're now in New York City public schools and thriving. And we've invested everything that we have into making the world a more thankful place, because we believe in it.
That is incredible. The collaboration association with the United Nations, tell me how it came about and why it's so important.
So we've been working with the UN for a few years now, and it started off specifically with UN Women around the Thankful for Women initiative, but it's progressed, and we now do a lot of work with the UN Office of Partnerships. And that's the team at the UN who are responsible for the 17 SDG goals. And those 17 SDG goals, I don't know how much you know about them.
No, I don't, and assume many people listening don't know even one of the 17.
So the United Nations have identified 17 key goals that they want to achieve by 2030 in order to make the world a more equitable and better place for everybody to live. And that's everything from SDG number 5, which is gender equality, to life in the water, which is oceans, obviously, to the planet, to climate change, to equal opportunity and access to fair work and pay for everybody. So it's a pretty extensive list.
Yeah, wow.
So we work with the UN Office of Partnerships, and why they love Thankful and the platform of Thankful is because corporates across the globe want to engage with the United Nations SDGs, and corporates across the globe have also recognised that consumers and their audience expect them to take a stand and expect them to help address some of these big issues in the world right now. But what Thankful does, it allows those 17 SDGs to be put in a language that makes it very easy for a corporate to engage with, but more importantly, for the corporate to then engage their consumer with. So SDG number 5 is gender equality. That falls under Thankful for Women. They have another SDG related to oceans, but I think they call it life underwater. Yeah. So that's, Thankful for oceans. They have Thankful for the planet. So it's Thankful for the environment as a campaign. So we can put it into language that makes it accessible for everybody, and a platform that makes it accessible for everybody. Plus, it's a platform that generates ongoing sustainable funding to help address some of these big issues in the world as well.
Do you think just playing devil's advocate a little bit, some of these corporates love programs like this because they see that consumers demand it these days and therefore they've got to do it or they will be ostracized? Or is there a genuineness out of some of them that they want to be part of the solution?
I think the consumers have definitely driven them to wanting to be part of the solution, and there's been global research that shows 87% of world consumers only want to engage with brands and organisations that have demonstrated and articulated their social purpose and their vision. So social currency of a brand is becoming increasingly more important. Consumers recognise that governments can't solve all of the big challenges in the world right now. And often it's the governments and leaders that are perpetuating this language of divisiveness and division. And governments don't have the funding to be able to solve some of these issues. So they do expect large organisations and brands to really step up to the plate, fill the void, and to help address some of these big global challenges. I think the organisations and brands have embraced and accepted that challenge, and they recognise that, you look at Unilever as an example, and all of the Unilever brands that have a purpose associated with them are overperforming than any other brand within the Unilever portfolio. So they've recognised the value of their values.
That's probably my point.
Yeah.
For them, and I get they've got a duty to their shareholders too. And if doing good makes them make more money, then I suppose it's a good outcome. Great example, Unilever. What are some of the other big corporates that you see as truly embracing, whether it's with you or others, this sense of purpose and this sense of responsibility around addressing some of these global problems?
I think there's some great brands. Patagonia is doing
my favourite on the planet.
An incredible job, and the CEO has come out and I think this is a really great example.
Remind me of her name again.
I don't remember off the top of my
She's
head.
incredible. I love how she just keeps suing Donald Trump.
Yeah, we all love that, yes. They're doing incredible work and really demonstrating their brand values. They're not just talking about it.
40 years they've been doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the difference, consumers are smart as well. And I think the brands that have integrated their purpose as part of their DNA, and it's throughout their culture of an organisation internally, as well as then demonstrating that externally through their actions, not their words, are the brands that are doing it so well. And it has to be more than a marketing strategy. It has to be more than a corporate social responsibility team or a marketing team or a sponsorship team. It has to be totally integrated within the culture of the organisation for it genuinely to have that amount of impact. And that's where Patagonia, I think, has done such an incredible job.
Have you read that book, the Let My People Go Surfing?
No, I haven't.
Yvon Chouinard wrote because he wanted to have a culture book for everyone that came into his organisation, and it was everything from how they do go about marketing to his belief in, I don't want to see four-wheel drives in the car park if we're an environmental organisation, through to who they're prepared to partner with in third worlds to make their garments, etc. It's a really good read for anyone that's interested in this space. That read, Let My People Go Surfing, and then they did that beautiful film 180 Degrees South, which was about him, and I forget the guy's name from North Face that tragically died a couple of years ago, about their story, but also about that it's not just about business for them, it is about preserving this planet for future generations
to come.
Yeah.
Social impact.
But then you've got the people on the other side, the H&Ms and the Zaras and the Monsantos that seem to me, and I'm not close enough to the fire to truly get burned, but seem to be so intertwined with governments and government policy that they are the biggest organizations in the world, and they continue to do so much bad that I just wonder whether the needle of good is moving fast enough.
I don't think the needle of good is ever going to move fast enough in the world. And, some of these big organisations that have legacy systems and culture, they're going to be slow-moving ships, and they're not going to be able to embrace this wave of change and demand from consumers as fast as some of the smaller challenger brands that are coming through. And again, that's some of the success of these smaller challenger brands. They can be nimble, they can be reactive, they can do things differently. They can set up their supply chain differently and have different expectations throughout their supply chain. So probably it will be a much longer journey for those big historic brands. And I think they are desperately trying because they've recognised the need to have a greater social impact and to be consciously, socially aware of the impact and the influence they have as well. Yeah.
Hard when their business models are so destructive to people, planet, and
it's not. There's no quick fix.
There's no quick fix for it.
It's going to take time.
How do you view the big powerhouse, the Facebooks, the Googles that seem to be founded and run by visionary, ethical, and outrageously wealthy people, but I just don't get a sense that what they do is aligned to the elevator pitch social responsibility that they profess?
Look, I'm not involved on a day-to-day to be really able to comment, but I think they are in amazing positions to use their influence for good. And they, provided they're coming at it from a place of good intention, which I guess is questionable, and coming back to your question. But I would love to work with them and to use the platform that they have created, the influence and the reach that they have created, to create a much bigger social impact, because they have so much ability and they have such an incredible platform to be able to do that if that were their intention, to be able to do it.
Yeah. I'm sure there's so many good people there, but it's that challenge of any public company that
absolutely
is bestowed to the benefit of their shareholders ultimately. So I get the challenges around that. Practicalities, gratitude in particular, mindfulness tied into that. Give people that, and some of our listeners are very old school, just get on with shit. What are you talking about? Grateful. What are you talking about? Mindfulness. But I think it's so critically important, because I do think there's this incredible disconnection. And, you know, we work in an industry that, or supplying chefs, that the suicide rate, as an example, is a real problem, not just here. And, you know, one of Anthony Paharich's best friends, Anthony Bourdain, that most people in the world would know of, tragically took his life last year. How do you advise people to just start? What can they do after listening to this podcast today to implement a gratitude practice into their life?
You know, just as simple as when you wake up every morning, or when you go to bed in the evening, or sitting around the dinner table with your family, ask your kids, ask your wife, or think of some things yourself, the one thing or the two things or the three things that happened in your day that you're thankful for. And it is amazing how it does quickly become a habit, and how it completely changes your perspective on the day. And I know when our kids were younger, driving them to school, and, you know, kids can be pretty ratty in the morning and not particularly cooperative, and a little cranky, and you're driving them to school and they're complaining about teachers and fighting and squabbling in the backseat. Just by simply asking them the question, tell me one thing you're thankful for right now, it stops the whole conversation. It changes everything very quickly. So just, you know, simple practices like that. At the end of your working day, often we write our big long to-do list. Try writing a I have done list, and you can just see what you have achieved today, rather than constantly focusing on what you think you still need to do. So go for a walk, 5 minutes, put some music on, 5 minutes, listen to the words of the song, rather than checking your phone while you're listening to music. So just stopping.
Yeah, really great advice. The think tank with the United Nations, what's it about? When's it on?
So what we're doing, and the reason that we are so delighted to be back in Australia, is that we're launching a big initiative here to help support Australian farming and agriculture. And so we're partnering with Australian brands here in Australia to co-brand product with the Thankful for Farmers logo.
Amazing.
So that every single time consumers see that logo, they know by buying that product, they're providing ongoing sustainable funding to support Australian farming and agriculture in regional and rural communities. Our goal is to have more products on supermarket shelves that have the Thankful for Farmers logo than not. So that every single time a consumer sees that, they can fill their basket with products supporting Australian farming and agriculture. So what we are doing as part of that, and after talking to a lot of incredible people here and thought leaders here, we realised that the challenges facing Australian agriculture and regional communities are by no means uniquely Australian. So climatic challenges are global. Changing consumer expectations are global. Tariffs and trade wars are global.
Yeah.
And mental health and wellness of farmers and those who live in regional and rural communities is also a global epidemic.
Yeah.
Here in Australia, farmers are 40% more likely to commit suicide than the rest of the Australian population. In America, more farmers commit suicide than veterans every year. In the United Kingdom, one farmer every week will commit suicide. In France, it's one farmer every 2 days. And in India, it's nearly 30 farmers a day. This is a global epidemic. So what we said that what we would do as part of the Australian launch of the Thankful for Farmers initiative, we'd create a global think tank, and working with Cornell University and the Atkinson Centre and the team there, as well as Professor Ruth Fadden from Johns Hopkins University, who started the Ethics Centre. We're curating this global think tank and including, obviously, Australians within that global think tank to really amplify this to a global conversation, but to also demonstrate and to showcase Australia as a thought leader, what can happen when global brands and local brands and organisations come together in collaboration for the greater good of wanting to support farming and rural communities. Our goal is to generate enough funding on an annual basis to be able to fund projects to create transformational change and to really identify what are the big levers we can pull and the big levers we can fund to create that transformational change. And we'll be doing that in collaboration with the global think tank, so understanding what research is happening and technology that we can then implement back here. But we're also curating an Australian advisory board as well. And then the two groups working together will be able to shortlist and identify the things that through the Thankful for Farmers initiative can fund and implement and sustain here in Australia.
Yeah, incredible. How do you make sure that all of that product you want to have on supermarket shelves more than not is actually not contradicting some of your other initiatives? Like there are certain farming practices that I would imagine are contradictory to some of your other big programs around climate change and things. How do you go about making sure that the alignment and looking after the farmers is also looking after the environment and ultimately the end consumer? Because they are all very intertwined.
Absolutely. And the purpose of this initiative and what really crystallized this for me was a conversation that I had with Professor Ruth Fadden. Mm-hmm. And she said, Kim, farmers are the frontline environmentalists. They're the people responsible for our environment on a daily basis, soil conditions and carbon emissions as well. But they're also the very same people who are responsible for our food security moving forward and for generations to come. If they are under either economic duress or mental health and wellness duress, do you think they're going to make the right decisions for either the environment or for food security? Or will they do what everybody else does and make the decision that they need to make to put food on the table?
Yeah.
So what we want to do as part of our Thankful for Farmers initiative is to celebrate our farmers, to educate consumers as well, to recognise when they do go to the supermarket and take out that litre of milk or pick up that apple or that fresh produce, the journey it's been on to get there. And to acknowledge and to celebrate, because we are so very spoiled in this country with the quality of produce that we have available to us. And we often don't realise when we're picking it up the journey it's been on to get there.
Yeah.
So it is about celebrating and elevating our farmers, celebrating those that are doing great things. It's not about highlighting those that aren't, because they will be on their own journey, and I'm sure there's a process in place through their associations and other organisations to help them on a more sustainable journey. But it is about celebrating our farmers, acknowledging their contribution to Australian culture, to the Australian economy, and really educating consumers as well.
Do you have criteria around it though? Who can participate, who can't?
We definitely have criteria around who our partners are, and who we would like our partners to be. Absolutely, and we have ethics and standards as well. So we would want to make sure that the brands that we're engaging with are absolutely using the best possible sustainable practices, ethical practices, treating their animals respectfully as well. So absolutely there will be criteria around it.
Because it really is it's a zoo when it comes to, I think some of the biggest challenges we face on the planet all are intertwined into food security.
Absolutely.
Antibiotic resistance, climate change, animal cruelty, obesity, malnourishment, they're all in. And then you come back to what you were talking about before with farmers and suicide, chefs and suicide. It's if ever an industry needed help for being grateful and mindful and getting people to do things differently and look at things differently, and ultimately consumers to pay more for practices that support all of those things, then I don't think there's ever been a better time.
Absolutely, and we have been overwhelmed by the interest and the level of engagement that we have received, and the brands wanting to participate and the organisations wanting to get behind this as well, because I think everybody has realised food security is a real challenge. Today, food security is a real challenge with climatic changes and changing consumer expectations and everything else in the mix. Generational farming is becoming a thing of the past. Farmers in the US are earning less in 2019 than they were in 2013, yet cost of living, cost of production and everything else is increasing. So we are very committed to amplifying this to a global conversation, but showcasing Australia as thought leaders in this space.
Yeah, which it potentially can be.
Absolutely.
And it's an interesting one, and we talk about this a lot internally about some of the big structural changes that are happening from an employment perspective in the world. And you take drivers as an example, that we're so touched by drivers, our own drivers that are bringing produce to us. And I think I know for a fact that drivers are the biggest category of employment in the world. And yet if we fast forward 10 years, then a large majority of those people aren't going to be required anymore. And where do they go? Because you can argue that we probably don't need that many more lawyers. We probably don't need that many more doctors. We probably don't need that many more engineers, but we really do need more farmers and more rural communities. And perhaps that's part of the solution of creating a framework where going to the land, even if you've raised as a city kid or a coastal kid, that is a true option for you. Yeah,
it's really interesting. And I think that, the decline in Australian regional and rural communities is a challenge in itself for those very reasons. We can't get enough people back there anymore, and with generations leaving the land, how do we encourage and how do we value that contribution and value those skills on the land as well? And at the moment, I think there's part of what we want to do with our Thankful for Farmers initiative is to really increase the value of those skills and to be all reminded the valuable contribution that farming and agriculture and regional and rural communities do make to the Australian economy and just as importantly to the Australian culture. That they're the backbone of the Aussie lifestyle.
Yeah. And you can use the Patagonia example again, that people are prepared to pay for the products that Patagonia sell because they know they're ethically great, their quality is great, etc. And when we look at the percentage of income that people spend, America's the worst. They spend 6.5% of their income on food, and it was 17% 50 years ago.
Wow.
Australia's 10%. And most of the Western countries are around that 10, 9%. You look at China and Indonesia and the more Eastern countries, they all spend 33, 34, 35%. If you go back to France and the European countries 50 years ago, it was 45% or more. Whereas there's this continual drive to the bottom where we expect more food at a lower price, and then we expect it to be ethically raised and healthy and nutritional, and it's just they're all diametrically opposed.
Absolutely. You look at the dairy industry as a classic example of that, and I read not that long ago that 5 years ago there were 22,000 dairy farms in Australia. Today there's 6,000.
Yeah.
They're predicting in the next 10 years we're going to be importing our milk because farmers can't produce their milk to be able to make a living. It's costing them money to produce their milk right now because we expect it to be as cheap as possible. So there does need to be a shift. There needs to be a realignment and a recognition, I think, and really valuing and acknowledging this community, which and reminding us all that we should be very thankful for them because they put food on our plate every single evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pay the farmer now, pay the doctor later. And it's such a smaller cost if we can rebalance that equation. And it's a real challenge. It's virtually impossible, I find, to convince people to do it. But then there's these green shoots that we're starting to see of people demanding, even in the most unlikely of places, in small rural pubs, small inner city pubs here in Australia that are saying, we want pasture-fed beef for our burgers. We want pasture-fed beef on our menu. And you go, wow, 5 years ago it was, we need to sell a $10 steak.
Yes.
The only challenge is they still wanted a $10 steak. So,
and, after living in New York for the last 2.5 years, I think the thing that we missed most about Australia was that quality of produce and just taking it for granted that you can walk into any restaurant or any cafe and whatever you're going to order is going to be a good quality. And I think that's something that we are very, very lucky in this country to have.
Although, is it truly? And I think this is part of the challenge and perhaps it's part of what we do with you ultimately is that true traceability around knowing through technology whether that is the most nutritional produce you can buy and therefore can you eat less of it and solve a whole bunch of problems from environment to your waistline.
Absolutely. And I think that whole using blockchain to in the food industry is something that's unbelievably exciting and being able to show consumers where their food has come from and that traceability of food is super exciting and is definitely something that we'd love to see more of and there's been some work globally on that as well. So
IBM have been doing a bunch of it. We've moved beyond, we've been working with PwC on it and on the whole Food Trust platform. And one of the big challenges around it was blockchain because it's so energy dense. And so they have come up with an alternative that is kinder to the environment. So we've got a proof of concept that we're literally about to write a check for and start piloting.
Very exciting. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah. How do people find you? Obviously, we'll put the link to your website up in there. Is that the best way to go if they want to be involved with things? Just go through there. Go through
the website. We will be launching this initiative in Australia in August. And then starting to roll product out from August onwards. And the plan is that we'll start with a small group of founding brands and organizations that we'll work with, but the intent is to continue to roll more and more brands in over time, and with additional support. And we'll be doing marketing around it so that everybody recognizes that Thankful for Farmers logo and they start looking for it when they're buying their weekly shop.
Nice.
As well. But the website, so thankful.org is the website to go to, and keep checking it regularly, and you'll start seeing more and more information about this Thankful for Farmers initiative that we're launching in August.
It's going to be the new Nike swoosh.
It's the new Nike swoosh. That's right.
It really is.
Yes.
Kim, thank you so much. We're going to do this a bunch of times over the next coming years, because I think it's an incredible initiative, and we really do hope we're part of it. But congratulations on what you're doing.
Thank you so much, and delighted to be working with you guys and collaborating. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.